The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Killian Brennan first saw her step down onto the wooden boardwalk of Red River, Texas. A woman so hollowed out by grief she looked like she might crumble at the slightest touch. Her black mourning dress hung loose on a frame that had clearly known better days, and her eyes held that peculiar emptiness he had seen in soldiers after the war, the kind that came from witnessing something the soul was never meant to endure. It was May of 1878, and the Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town, but she seemed not to notice the heat at all. Killian had come into town for supplies, his wagon already half loaded with feed and tools he needed for his ranch outside of town. He stood there beside his team of horses, watching without meaning to as the woman collected a single worn carpetbag from the driver. She moved with careful precision, as though holding herself together required constant concentration. When she turned to ask the station master something, he caught sight of her face properly for the first time. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, far too young to carry such weight in her expression. "That is Sarah Harper," old Tom from the general store said, appearing at Killian's elbow with his characteristic lack of warning. "Widow. Lost her husband to fever out in San Antonio 6 months back. Heard she lost a baby too, stillborn, just after he passed. Coming here to live with her aunt, I reckon." Killian felt something twist in his chest. He was 30 himself, had owned his ranch for 5 years now, built it up from nearly nothing after spending his own dark years trying to forget the war. He knew what it looked like when someone was barely holding on. "Her aunt?" he asked, still watching as Sarah Harper stood looking lost in the middle of the dusty street. "Martha Hendricks, runs the boarding house on 3rd Street. Good woman. That girl is going to need looking after, you can see that plain as day." Killian could indeed see it plain as day. He watched as an older woman hurried out from one of the buildings, her arms already outstretched. Martha Hendricks, presumably. The reunion was quiet, not the joyful kind but the necessary kind, and then the two women disappeared into the boarding house together. He thought about her on and off for the next week as he worked his land, repairing fences and checking on his small herd of cattle. The Brennan Ranch was not the biggest spread in the area, but it was his, every acre earned through backbreaking work and careful management. He had 3 hands who worked for him, good men who knew their business, and between the 4 of them they kept things running smoothly. It was the following Sunday when he saw her again at church. Red River only had one church, a simple wooden structure that served the whole community regardless of specific denomination. Sarah Harper sat in the back pew beside her aunt, and Killian found his attention drifting to her throughout the service. She did not sing the hymns, did not seem to register much of anything happening around her. She simply sat, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. After the service, as people milled about outside exchanging pleasantries and news, he watched Martha trying to introduce her niece to various townspeople. Sarah smiled when it seemed required, spoke quiet words he could not hear from where he stood, but there was no life in any of it. She was going through motions, playing a part, existing but not living. "You should say hello," said a voice beside him, and he turned to find Reverend Cole watching him with knowing eyes. "Would not want to impose," Killian said, but even as he spoke the words he found himself walking in their direction. Martha Hendricks saw him coming and smiled warmly. She had always been kind to him, had brought him meals when he first started out on his ranch and was living in little more than a shack. "Killian Brennan, how lovely to see you. Have you met my niece?" "Sarah, this is Killian Brennan. He owns a ranch just outside of town." "Killian, this is my niece, Sarah Harper." Up close, he could see the violet shadows beneath her eyes, The way her skin seemed stretched too tight over delicate bones. But he could also see that she must have been vibrant once, before grief had drained all the color from her world. She had auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, hazel eyes that might have sparkled with life in another time, and fine features that would have been striking if they held any animation at all. "Madam," he said, removing his hat, "pleased to make your acquaintance." "Mr. Brennan," she replied, her voice soft and carefully controlled. She offered her hand and he took it gently, surprised by how cold her fingers were despite the warm day. "I hope you are settling in well," he said, then immediately regretted it. What a foolish thing to say to a woman so obviously adrift. "Everyone has been very kind," she said, the words automatic, rehearsed. Martha filled the awkward silence that followed. "Killian here has one of the finest ranches in the area. Built it up from scratch, he did. Real self-made man." "That is commendable," Sarah said, but her eyes had already drifted away, focused on something in the middle distance that only she could see. He made his excuses and left shortly after, but the image of her haunted face stayed with him. Over the following weeks, he saw her around town occasionally. She had taken a position helping her aunt at the boarding house, cooking and cleaning for the residents. Martha had told anyone who would listen that it was good for Sarah to keep busy, to have purpose. But Killian wondered if perhaps staying busy was just another way of not having to feel. It was late June when circumstance forced them into more direct contact. He had come into town for his usual supplies and found the general store in a state of chaos. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the place with her husband, had taken ill suddenly, and Mr. Patterson was beside himself trying to manage the store alone while worrying over his wife. "The doctor is with her now," Tom Patterson said, running a harried hand through his thinning hair. "Says it might be appendicitis, might need to operate. Lord, I cannot think straight." "You go on and be with her," Killian said firmly. "I can wait for my supplies. But I have 3 other orders that need filling today, and Mrs. Hendricks is expecting a delivery at the boarding house within the hour, and I cannot just close the store. People depend on us." Killian made a decision. "Tell me what needs doing. I will help." It took some convincing, but eventually Tom showed him the list of what needed to be delivered to the boarding house and hurried back to his wife's side. Killian loaded up the crates and barrels, checked the list twice, and drove his wagon over to 3rd Street. Martha met him at the door, looking surprised. "Killian, where is Tom?" He explained the situation while beginning to unload the supplies. Martha fretted appropriately over poor Mrs. Patterson and then called for Sarah to help put everything away. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked slightly less ghostly than she had when she first arrived, though perhaps that was just his imagination. She had gained a bit of weight at least, no longer quite so skeletal. "Mr. Brennan," she acknowledged with a small nod. "Mrs. Harper," he replied. They worked in silence for a time, Sarah directing him where to place the heavier items while she organized the dry goods in the pantry. Martha had been called away by one of the boarders, leaving them alone with the work. "Your aunt says you are settling in," Killian ventured as he set down a sack of flour. "My aunt is optimistic by nature," Sarah replied, and there was something in her tone, the faintest hint of wry awareness that caught his attention. "And you are not," she paused in her work, a jar of preserves in her hands. "I used to be, before. Such a small word to contain so much loss. "I am sorry," he said. "For your losses, both of them." Her hands tightened on the jar. "Everyone is sorry. It does not change anything." "No," he agreed. "It does not, but it is still true." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. He saw her taking in his weathered face, the scar along his jawline from a piece of shrapnel in the war, the calluses on his hands, the honest wear on his clothes. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy something because her expression softened fractionally. "Thank you for bringing these supplies," she said. "I know my aunt appreciates it, especially with Mrs. Patterson being ill. Happy to help." They finished the work in a silence that felt slightly less awkward than before. As he was leaving, Martha caught him at the door. "Thank you, Killian. You are a good man." She paused, then added quietly, "She does not talk to most people, you know, says only what is necessary and nothing more. But she spoke to you a bit just now. That is something." He did not know what to say to that, so he simply tipped his hat and left. Mrs. Patterson recovered from her illness, but the incident seemed to have established some kind of connection between Killian and the boarding house. He found himself volunteering to help with deliveries when Tom was short-handed, to fix a leaking pipe in one of the rooms, to repair the back steps that had grown rickety with age. Martha never asked him directly, but she always seemed pleased when he showed up, and she always made sure Sarah was the one working alongside him. He was not sure if Martha was playing matchmaker or simply trying to draw her niece out of her shell by forcing her to interact with people. Either way, he found he did not mind. Sarah was quiet, often lost in her own thoughts, but occasionally she would say something that revealed the person she had been before tragedy struck. She had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments. He learned that she had been a schoolteacher before her marriage, that she loved reading, that she had once wanted to travel and see the ocean. "Why did you not?" he asked one day as they worked together painting the boarding house's front fence. It was late July and the heat was oppressive, but the work needed doing. "My husband did not want to," she said simply. "He was content in San Antonio, had his business there, his routine. I thought there would be time later. There is never as much time as you think there will be." "No," he agreed, thinking of his own parents, both gone before he turned 25. "There is not." "You have family, Mr. Brennan," Killian, he said. "And no, not anymore. Lost my folks to cholera in '73, never had siblings. So you are alone too." "I suppose I am. But I have the ranch, the work, it helps." She nodded slowly. "My aunt keeps me busy, that helps also, sometimes. Other times it just makes me tired." It was the most honest thing she had said to him, and he felt the weight of the trust it represented. "You do not have to pretend with me," he said quietly. "To be better than you feel, I know what it is like carrying that weight." She looked at him with those haunted hazel eyes. "Do you?" "I was at Shiloh," he said. "In the war, saw things no person should see, came home different than I left. Took a long time before I could sleep through a whole night without the dreams. Longer still before I could see any kind of future for myself. And now I sleep most nights. Now I can see past tomorrow. It gets easier, I will not lie and say it does not. But it takes time, and it is not a straight path." Sarah returned her attention to the fence, her brush moving in steady strokes. "Everyone wants me to be over it already. 6 months is apparently long enough to mourn a husband and child both. I should be ready to smile and laugh and think about the future." "That is nonsense," Killian said firmly. "Anyone who thinks that has never really lost anything that mattered." She stopped painting and turned to face him fully. "Thank you for saying that. It is just the truth." They finished the fence in companionable silence, and when Martha came out with lemonade for them both, Killian thought he saw the faintest hint of a genuine smile cross Sarah's face. August brought scorching heat and a drought that had all the ranchers worried. Killian spent long days ensuring his cattle had enough water, riding out to the creek that ran through his property and praying it would not run dry. His ranch hands worked tirelessly, and he was grateful for their dedication. It was during this busy time that one of his hands, a young man named Pete, took a bad fall from his horse and broke his arm. The doctor in Red River set the bone, but Pete could not work for several weeks. With the drought and all the extra work it created, being a man short was a serious problem. Killian mentioned this in passing when he stopped by the boarding house to fix a broken shutter. Sarah overheard, and to his surprise, she spoke up. "I could help," she said. Both he and Martha stared at her. "Help?" Martha repeated. "I grew up on a farm in Arkansas before my parents passed. I know how to work. I can cook for the hands, handle some of the lighter chores. It would give you an extra pair of hands at least, and it would be better than spending all day doing laundry and scrubbing floors." Martha looked concerned. "Sarah, dear, ranch work is hard. You are barely starting to get your strength back." "I am going mad here, Aunt Martha," Sarah said, and there was heat in her voice for the first time since Killian had met her. "I need to do something different. I need to not be surrounded by these same walls every day, drowning in my own thoughts." Killian understood that feeling more than he could say. After the war, if he had not had work to throw himself into, work that exhausted him so completely he could not think, he might have lost himself entirely. "I would pay fair wages," he said carefully. "And you would have your own room in the ranch house, proper accommodations. The work would be honest, but it would be hard. If you truly want to try it, I would be grateful for the help." Martha looked like she wanted to protest, but something in Sarah's expression stopped her. "If this is what you want, dear." "It is." And so it was arranged. Sarah packed a bag, and 2 days later Killian drove her out to his ranch. The spread was modest but well-maintained, about 800 acres of grazing land with a decent-sized house, a barn, and a bunkhouse for the hands. The main house was simple, just 4 rooms and a loft, but it was solidly built and comfortable. "You will have the spare room down here," he said, showing her inside. The house was clean but obviously masculine in its furnishings, practical and without decoration. "The hands stay in the bunkhouse and I sleep in the loft. There is a lock on your door if that makes you more comfortable." "I trust you," Sarah said, and he believed she meant it. He introduced her to the other 2 hands, Carlos and Jim, both of whom were respectful and seemed relieved to have help with the cooking if nothing else. That first evening, Sarah made dinner for all of them, producing a stew that was the best meal Killian had eaten in months. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "My mother," she said. "She said a woman should be able to make something good out of whatever she has on hand. That was a useful skill on a farm where money was tight." The routine they fell into over the following days was surprisingly natural. Sarah did cook for them, but she also insisted on helping with other tasks. She fed the chickens, gathered eggs, tended the vegetable garden that Killian had half-heartedly maintained, and even helped mend tack and equipment. She was not strong enough for the heaviest work, but she was capable and willing, and her presence changed the atmosphere of the ranch in ways Killian had not anticipated. The house felt less empty with her in it. He would come in from a long day of work to find her reading by the lamp, or working on some mending, or writing letters to an old friend back in Arkansas. Sometimes they talked, conversations that ranged from practical matters to more philosophical discussions about life and loss and hope. Other times they simply shared the space in comfortable silence. He found himself looking forward to the evenings, to those quiet hours when the work was done, and they could simply be 2 people trying to make sense of life's hardships. One night, about 3 weeks after she had come to stay, he found her sitting on the porch steps looking up at the stars. The drought had finally broken that afternoon with a blessed rainfall, and the air smelled clean and fresh. "Room too warm?" he asked, settling down on the step beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Just wanted to see the sky," she said. The stars are so bright out here away from town. One of my favorite things about the ranch, he agreed, makes you feel small in a good way. Reminds you that whatever problems you are carrying, the world is bigger than all of it. I used to look at the stars with my husband, she said quietly. That was something we enjoyed together. After he died, I could not bring myself to look up. It hurt too much. And now it still hurts. But it is a different kind of hurt, more like remembering than like dying. He understood the distinction. That is progress. Is it? Sometimes I feel guilty for hurting less, like I am betraying him by learning to live without him. Killian turned to look at her profile in the starlight. May I tell you something I learned? The people we love do not want us to stop living when they die. They want us to carry them with us in here. He touched his chest over his heart, and to keep going, to find joy again. That is not betrayal. That is honoring them by not wasting the life they no longer have. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it. How did you get to be so wise? Hard experience. And a lot of time sitting alone under these same stars trying to make peace with things. She leaned against him then, just slightly, her shoulder touching his. It was the first time she had initiated any physical contact, and he held very still, afraid to break the moment. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me somewhere to be, for not treating me like I might shatter, for understanding. You do not need to thank me, Sarah. They sat there until the night grew cold, and when they finally went inside, Killian felt something had shifted between them, something fragile but real. As summer turned to autumn, Sarah continued to bloom like a flower finally getting enough sunlight. She gained weight, healthy color returning to her cheeks. She smiled more often, and sometimes he even heard her laugh at something Carlos said or at the antics of the barn cat who had adopted her as his favorite person. She was coming back to life, and Killian watched it happen with a growing tenderness he did not quite know what to name. He was falling in love with her. He knew that, had probably known it for weeks but had not wanted to acknowledge it, afraid of what it might mean. She was still healing, still rebuilding herself from the ruins of her grief. The last thing she needed was him complicating matters with feelings she might not be ready for, might never be ready for. But he could not help the way his heart lifted when he saw her each morning, or the way he found excuses to work near wherever she was, or the way he memorized the sound of her rare laughter like it was the most precious thing in the world. It was October when things came to a head. Pete had recovered and returned to work, which meant Sarah's original reason for being at the ranch no longer existed. He had expected her to return to her aunt's boarding house, had dreaded the thought of the ranch feeling empty again without her presence to fill it. But she did not mention leaving, and neither did he. They simply continued on day after day, the arrangement unspoken but mutually desired. Then came the day he rode out to check on the northern fence line and took a bad spill when his horse spooked at a rattlesnake. He hit the ground hard, his head connecting with a rock, and the world went gray around the edges. When he came back to himself, he was lying in his own bed with Sarah leaning over him, her face tight with worry. The doctor from town was there too, packing up his bag. "Welcome back, doctor." Morrison said, "You gave everyone quite a scare. That is a nasty concussion you have got there." "What happened?" Killian managed, though talking made his head throb. "Carlos found you out by the north pasture. You had been thrown from your horse. Do you remember?" It came back to him in pieces. The snake, his horse rearing, the ground rushing up to meet him. "The horse?" "Fine," Sarah said, her voice tight. "The horse is fine. You are the one who cracked your fool head open." He had never heard her sound angry before, and it startled him enough that he tried to sit up. The room spun violently, and he might have been sick if Sarah had not gently but firmly pushed him back down. "You are not getting up," she said. "Dr. Morrison says you need to rest for at least a week. No riding, no heavy work, nothing that might make the headaches worse." "I cannot just lie here. The ranch needs running." "The ranch has 3 capable hands who know their business," Sarah said firmly. "And it has me. We will manage just fine. You are going to rest whether you like it or not." The doctor left instructions and departed, and Sarah appointed herself his primary nurse. She was, he discovered, quite tyrannical when it came to ensuring he followed the doctor's orders. She brought him meals, made sure he drank enough water, kept the room dark and quiet, and refused to let him so much as sit up for too long the first few days. "You are enjoying this," he accused on the 3rd day, when she had just prevented him from getting out of bed to check on something he heard in the yard. "I am not," she said, but there was the ghost of a smile on her face. "Well, perhaps a little. You are always taking care of everyone else. It is about time someone took care of you." As his head slowly improved, they spent long hours talking. With nothing to do but rest, Killian found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, stories from his childhood, his fears about keeping the ranch profitable, his dreams for the future. Sarah, in turn, opened up about her marriage, painting a picture that was both fond and honest. "I did love him," she said one afternoon. "But I was young when we married, only 19, and I think I loved the idea of being married as much as I loved him. He was a good man, steady and reliable, but there was not much passion between us. More like companionship. When he died, I mourned him, but I think I mourned the future I had imagined more than the reality I had been living." "That does not make your grief less real," Killian said. "No, but it makes it more complicated. And the baby." Her voice caught. "I wanted the baby so much. That loss, that was the one that nearly destroyed me. I had already lost my husband, and then to lose the child too, to never even hear her cry. I felt like God was punishing me for something, though I could not imagine what." He reached out and took her hand, twining his fingers through hers. "It was not punishment. Sometimes terrible things just happen and there is no reason, no sense to it. But you survived, Sarah. You are still here. That matters." She squeezed his hand tightly. "I am only still here because of you." "That is not true." "It is. If you had not shown me that it was possible to keep living, to find purpose again, I do not know that I would have made it. Coming here, working alongside you, learning to see past my own pain, it saved me." His heart was thundering in his chest, and he knew he was about to risk everything, but he could not hold the words back any longer. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. If you want me to stop, just say so, but I cannot keep quiet anymore. I have fallen in love with you. Somewhere between the fence painting and the stargazing and watching you come back to life, I fell completely in love with you. I know the timing might be terrible, and if you need me to keep that to myself I will, but I wanted you to know." She stared at him, her hazel eyes wide, and for a terrible moment he thought he had ruined everything. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative and sweet. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid. Afraid it was too soon, afraid of betraying the past, afraid of losing someone again. But I do love you, Killian. You make me want to live again, not just survive." He pulled her close, careful of his still healing head, and kissed her properly. It was like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once, familiar and thrilling in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah laughed. Actually laughed, bright and joyful and completely unguarded. "What?" he asked, grinning like a fool. "I was just thinking that my aunt is going to be absolutely insufferable about this. She has been trying to push us together since the moment you first showed up at the boarding house." "Smart woman, your aunt." They took things slow after that, letting their relationship deepen naturally. Killian recovered from his concussion, and they settled back into the rhythm of ranch life. But now there were stolen kisses in the barn and held hands on evening walks, and a sense of building something together rather than simply existing in parallel. In November, Killian took Sarah into town and bought her a ring. It was simple, just a gold band with a small sapphire, but her eyes filled with tears when he slipped it on her finger. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need saving or I need someone to cook. Marry me because we choose each other, because we make each other better, because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where they had first exchanged pleasantries after her arrival in Red River. It was a small ceremony, just Martha and the ranch hands and a few friends from town, but it was perfect. Sarah wore a dress of deep blue rather than white, a conscious choice to honor her past while stepping into her future. When Killian saw her walking down the aisle toward him, he thought his heart might burst from the sheer joy of it. Reverend Cole performed the ceremony, speaking about second chances and the resilience of the human spirit, and when Killian kissed his bride, the small congregation erupted in genuine celebration. The wedding supper was held at the boarding house, Martha having insisted on hosting. She pulled Killian aside at one point, her eyes damp with happy tears. "You take care of my girl," she said. "With everything I have," he promised. "You already have. I do not think you know what a gift you gave her, Killian. She was so lost when she arrived here. I was genuinely afraid I might lose her, that the grief would swallow her whole, but you showed her how to live again. She did that herself. I just walked beside her. You are a good man. I am glad she found you." That night, Killian and Sarah returned to the ranch as husband and wife. The hands had made themselves scarce, giving them privacy, and they stood together in the main room of the house that was now truly theirs. "Are you happy?" he asked, holding her close. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," she said honestly. "There is still sadness in me, Killian. I do not think that ever fully goes away. I will always carry the loss of my first husband and my daughter, but alongside that sadness is joy now, real joy. You taught me that those things can coexist." "We taught each other," he corrected. "You think I was whole when you met me. I was just going through motions, working myself to exhaustion so I would not have to feel anything. You reminded me what it means to actually live, not just survive." They made love that night with a tenderness that spoke of healing and hope, two broken people who had found ways to fit their jagged pieces together into something whole. The winter was mild that year, and Sarah threw herself into making the ranch house feel like a true home. She sewed curtains for the windows, planted bulbs that would bloom in spring, and filled the rooms with small touches that spoke of permanence and care. Killian watched her nest and felt a contentment he had never known. In February, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told him one evening after supper, her face a mixture of joy and terror. "I am so happy," she said, "but I am also so afraid. After last time, after losing my daughter, I cannot help but fear this might happen again." He held her while she cried, then pulled back to look into her eyes. "We are going to take every precaution. You are going to rest when you need to rest. Dr. Morrison is going to monitor you closely, and we are going to trust that this time will be different. But Sarah, even if the worst happens, we will face it together. You are not alone in this. Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, we will be all right, that we will not let this break us. I promise. We have survived too much to break now." The pregnancy progressed carefully. Sarah had moments of panic, especially as she approached the point in her term where she had lost the first baby, but Killian stayed steady beside her. Dr. Morrison visited regularly, and he pronounced both mother and baby healthy and strong. As spring turned to summer, Sarah's belly swelled with life. She continued to do light work around the ranch, refusing to be treated like she was fragile, but she also listened to her body and rested when needed. Killian found himself talking to her belly at night, telling their unborn child about the ranch, about the stars, about all the things they would do together as a family. "You are going to be a wonderful father," Sarah said one night, her hand over his as it rested on her stomach. "I am going to try my best." Labor came on a hot July night, fierce and fast. Killian rode like hell to fetch Dr. Morrison while Martha came to stay with Sarah. By the time he returned with the doctor, Sarah was well into active labor, her face flushed with effort and pain. The hours that followed were the longest of Killian's life. He stayed by Sarah's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement even when she cursed him for putting her in this condition. Martha and Dr. Morrison worked efficiently, and just as dawn was breaking over the Texas plains, a baby's cry split the air. "A boy," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the squalling infant on Sarah's chest. "Strong and healthy." Sarah wept as she held her son, and Killian wept with her, overwhelmed by the miracle of new life, by the fact that they had made it through. "What should we call him?" she asked, looking up at Killian with exhausted joy. They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Killian knew exactly what fit. "Thomas," he said, "after the storekeeper who introduced us, and William for his middle name if you like it. Strong names for a strong boy." "Thomas William Brennan," Sarah repeated, smiling. "It is perfect." The baby nursed and then slept, and Dr. Morrison pronounced both mother and child healthy before departing with promises to check on them in a few days. Martha stayed long enough to make sure Sarah was comfortable and had everything she needed, then tactfully returned to town. Killian sat beside the bed, watching his wife and son sleep in the golden morning light. He thought about the woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 14 months ago, so broken and lost she had seemed barely alive. He thought about his own loneliness before she arrived, the way he had been merely existing rather than truly living. Now here they were, a family. Not without scars, not without painful memories, but whole in the ways that mattered. Over the following weeks, Killian discovered the particular exhaustion of new parenthood. Thomas was a good baby overall, but he had his fussy nights, and Killian took his turns walking the floor with his son, singing old songs his mother had once sung to him. Sarah recovered well from the birth, her strength returning steadily, and the sight of her nursing their child filled Killian with a tenderness that sometimes made his chest ache. The ranch continued to thrive. His herd had grown, and he was able to hire another hand, a young man named Robert, who was eager to learn the trade. The extra help meant Killian could spend more time with his family, could be present for the small moments of Thomas learning to smile, to laugh, to reach for his parents with chubby baby hands. On their first wedding anniversary in December, Killian arranged for Martha to watch Thomas so he could take Sarah into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was not fancy by city standards, but it was the nicest place Red River had to offer, and Sarah dressed in the green dress he loved, her hair styled in a way that made her look like the young woman she was rather than a hardened frontier wife. "You are staring," she said as they waited for their meal, but she was smiling. "Can you blame me? You are beautiful. I am a mother with milk stains on half my clothes and perpetual shadows under my eyes from lack of sleep. You are beautiful," he repeated firmly. "The most beautiful thing I have ever seen." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Do you remember a year ago when you asked me to marry you? Of course. I was so scared, not of you but of being happy again." It felt like tempting fate, like if I allowed myself to be too happy, something terrible would happen to balance it out. And now I know that happiness and sadness are not balanced scales. You can have both. You can be happy without erasing the past. I will always carry the memory of my first husband and my first daughter, but that does not diminish what I feel for you and Thomas. If anything, having known loss makes me appreciate what we have even more. They ate their meal and talked about everything and nothing, just enjoying being together without the immediate demands of a baby needing attention. When they returned home, Thomas was sleeping peacefully, and Martha reported he had been an angel. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, the Brennan family stayed warm inside their sturdy house. Killian had never been much for celebrating Christmas, but Sarah brought new traditions into their home. She made a wreath for the door from pine branches, baked special treats, and insisted they all attend the Christmas Eve service in town. Thomas was nearly 6 months old by then, beginning to sit up on his own and babbling constantly. During the service, he made enough noise that Sarah had to take him out to the vestibule, but Killian just smiled. This was his life now, messy and loud and full of love. The years that followed brought both challenges and blessings. The drought returned in 1880, forcing Killian to make hard decisions about his herd, but they weathered it. Sarah became pregnant again in 1881, and this time she faced it with more confidence, though Killian still worried every day until their daughter, Martha Rose, arrived healthy and screaming in March of 1882. Thomas proved to be an adventurous child, always getting into things he should not, always asking questions, always wanting to help his father with ranch work. Killian taught him to ride when he was 4, and the boy took to it like he was born in the saddle. Martha Rose, named for Sarah's aunt who had passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1881, was quieter than her brother but no less determined. She had her mother's hazel eyes and her father's stubborn streak, and by the time she could walk, she was following Thomas everywhere, refusing to be left behind. Sarah taught both children to read, and on winter evenings they would gather around the fireplace, Killian in his chair with whatever child was youngest on his lap, Sarah beside him, all of them listening as she read from whatever book had captured their interest that week. The ranch continued to grow. By 1885, Killian had expanded his holdings to nearly 1,200 acres and employed 6 hands year-round. He had a reputation as a fair boss and a good rancher, and his cattle brought strong prices at market. The original small house had been expanded twice, growing to accommodate their growing family and their increasing prosperity. But it was not the land or the money that mattered to Killian. It was the life they had built together. It was Sarah's laughter echoing through the house. It was Thomas's endless energy and questions. It was Martha Rose's quiet observations that were often startlingly insightful. It was the way he and Sarah still made time to sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their day. In 1886, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. At 31, she joked that she was getting too old for this, but Killian could see she was pleased. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and Dr. Morrison ordered her to rest more than she wanted to. Killian hired a woman from town to help with the housework and the children, and Sarah reluctantly accepted that she needed the assistance. Their 3rd child, a boy they named James, arrived in February of 1887 after a difficult labor that left Killian shaken. Sarah recovered slowly, and Dr. Morrison quietly told them that another pregnancy might be dangerous. They accepted this news with a mixture of sadness and gratitude for the 3 healthy children they had. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Thomas grew into a capable young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Martha Rose proved to have a gift for numbers and helped keep the ranch accounts once she was old enough. James was the family's dreamer, always drawing pictures or making up elaborate stories. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Killian and Sarah sat on the same porch where they had once gazed at stars and talked about survival and healing. The children were asleep inside, the ranch was quiet, and they had a rare moment of peace. "You ever think about the day you arrived in Red River?" Killian asked. "Sometimes," Sarah said. "It feels like another lifetime, like that was a different person entirely. In some ways, I suppose it was. I was so broken then, Killian. I truly did not think I would ever feel whole again. There were days when I was not sure I wanted to try." He pulled her closer. "I know, but you loved me anyway. Even when I was nothing but sharp edges and empty spaces, you loved me. And somehow that love helped me find the pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. You did the same for me. I was living half a life before you came. Just going through the motions. You reminded me what it meant to really be alive." She kissed him softly. "We healed each other. We did." They sat in comfortable silence for a time, then Sarah spoke again. "I want you to know that I am happy, Killian, truly, deeply happy. I never thought I would be able to say that again, but here I am. You gave me that gift. You gave it to yourself. I just walked beside you while you did the hard work. We are both terrible at taking credit," she said with a laugh. The years continued to unfold. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. They built a small house on the western edge of the Brennan property and started their own family. Martha Rose went to Teachers College in San Antonio, returning to teach at the Red River School. James eventually moved to Dallas to work for a newspaper, his stories and drawings finding a wider audience than Red River could provide. Killian and Sarah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines earned through years of laughter and hard work and living. The ranch continued under their management, with Thomas taking on more responsibility each year. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation while also appreciating the ability to hand the children back to their parents when they grew fussy. In 1898, on a warm spring evening, Killian and Sarah celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children had thrown them a party, the house full of family and friends, but now the guests had departed and they sat alone on the porch, the same spot where so many important moments had unfolded. 20 years, Sarah marveled. It has gone so fast. Best 20 years of my life, Killian said. Mine too. You know what I realized today? What is that? I have now been your wife longer than I was a widow. That part of my life, as painful as it was, as much as it shaped me, it is not the defining thing anymore. This is my life. You, the children, the ranch, all of it. This is who I am now. Killian felt the truth of that settle over them both. The past would always be part of their story, but it did not have to be the whole story. I love you, Sarah Brennan. And I love you, Killian Brennan. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was too broken to see a way forward. Thank you for loving me until I could remember how to be whole. They kissed as the sun set over their land, two people who had found each other in the midst of grief and loneliness and had built something beautiful from the ruins. The years that followed brought more changes. Killian's hair went fully white, and his joints ached on cold mornings, but he still rode out to check his land most days. Sarah's hands developed arthritis, making some tasks difficult, but she still insisted on cooking Sunday dinner for the whole extended family. They watched their grandchildren grow, attended weddings and funerals, celebrated triumphs and weathered sorrows. In 1905, Killian fell ill with pneumonia. At 67, It hit him hard, and for several terrifying days Sarah thought she might lose him. But he pulled through, stubborn as always, though he was weaker after, unable to do as much as he once had. Thomas took over most of the ranch operations then, and Killian found himself in the strange position of watching someone else run the enterprise he had built. It was difficult at first, letting go of that control, but Sarah helped him see it as a new chapter rather than an ending. "You built something that outlasts you," she told him as they sat together watching Thomas work with the hands. "That is the greatest legacy anyone can leave. Not just land and cattle, but knowledge passed down, values instilled. Look at our children, our grandchildren. They all carry pieces of what you taught them." "What we taught them," he corrected. "This was never just my ranch, Sarah. It was always ours." They grew old together with grace, supporting each other through the inevitable losses and changes that came with age. When Sarah's beloved Aunt Martha's boarding house was torn down to make way for a new bank, they grieved the passing of that piece of their history. When old friends passed away, they attended the funerals and held each other through the sadness. But there was joy too. When their first great-grandchild was born in 1907, Sarah wept with happiness. The baby girl was named Sarah, and holding her tiny namesake, she marveled at the fullness of the life she had built. "If someone had told me that day I stepped off the stagecoach in Red River that this would be my future, I never would have believed them," she told Killian. "I could not see past my own grief. I could not imagine ever feeling anything but pain. But here you are." "Here we are," she corrected, reaching for his hand with her free one, the baby cradled carefully in her other arm. "We built this together, every bit of it." As 1910 dawned, bringing with it a new decade, Killian was 72 and Sarah 64. They moved slower now, tired more easily, but their minds remained sharp and their love as strong as ever. The ranch was firmly in Thomas's capable hands, with his own sons learning the trade just as he once had from Killian. On quiet evenings, Killian and Sarah would sit together in the main room of the house, the same house that had sheltered them through so many years. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories, discussing family news. Other times they simply sat in companionable silence, comfortable enough with each other that words were not always necessary. "You have any regrets?" Sarah asked one evening in early spring. Killian considered the question carefully. "I wish I had found you sooner. I wish you had not had to suffer so much before we met. But do I regret the life we built together? Not for a single moment. I was thinking today about the woman I was when I arrived here, how lost I was. How certain I was that I would never be happy again. And now I know that happiness is not a betrayal of grief, that you can honor the past while still embracing the present, that broken things can be made whole again, just perhaps in a different shape than they were before." She reached over and took his weathered hand in hers. "You showed me that, Killian. You loved me when I was too shattered to love myself. You were patient when I needed time. You walked beside me until I could walk on my own again. And you gave me a reason to truly live instead of just existing. You filled my empty house and my empty heart. We saved each other, Sarah. That is what we did." The spring of 1911 was particularly beautiful, with wildflowers covering the ranch land in waves of color. Sarah, despite her arthritis, insisted on planting a garden, and Killian helped her as much as his own aging body would allow. They worked together in the warm sunshine, their movements slow but steady. And if anyone had been watching, they would have seen two people who had grown so accustomed to each other's rhythms that they moved almost as one. In June of that year, the whole family gathered for Thomas and Elizabeth's 25th wedding anniversary. The celebration was held at the ranch, 3 generations coming together to eat and laugh and share stories. Killian sat in his favorite chair, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and felt a profound sense of completion. That evening, after everyone had left, he and Sarah walked slowly out to the porch. It took them longer than it once had, their steps more careful, but they made it to their spot and settled into the chairs that had been placed there years ago specifically for this purpose. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the sky in colors that took Killian's breath away even after all these years of watching Texas sunsets. "I have been thinking," Sarah said softly. "About what?" "About how strange life is. How you can be certain you know how your story will go and then everything changes. I was supposed to grow old with someone else. I was supposed to raise a daughter. That was the plan." Killian felt a familiar protective instinct rise up, but Sarah squeezed his hand. "I am not sad," she continued. "I am just marveling at how life works. That plan did not happen. Instead, I got this. I got you and our children and this beautiful life we built together. It was not the plan, but it was so much better than I could have imagined." "I am glad my broken plans led me to you," Killian said. "And I am glad mine led me to you." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars emerged, the same stars they had gazed at so many times over the decades. Killian thought about the long journey that had brought them both to this moment, all the pain and healing and growth. He thought about the young woman stepping off the stagecoach, drowning in grief, and the lonely rancher who had somehow found the right words to reach her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For choosing to live. For choosing me. For building this life with me." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close in the gathering darkness. "Thank you for loving me when I was broken," she whispered. "Thank you for being patient enough to wait while I put myself back together. Thank you for showing me that being whole again was possible. You were never broken, Sarah. You were wounded, yes, grieving, yes, but not broken. I could see that from the start, even if you could not. You just needed time to heal, and someone to believe in me while I did. Always." They sat there under the stars, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, whose love had transformed them both. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and real, built through decades of hard work and dedication. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, telling the story of a family that had grown from the union of two wounded souls. Killian knew they did not have many years left. At their age, every day was a gift, but he was not afraid of what came next. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and created something that would continue long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the values they had instilled, the lessons they had taught, the love they had demonstrated through every action. Sarah shifted against him, and he pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her, memorizing this moment as he had memorized so many others over their years together. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, witness to their love story from broken beginning to this peaceful present. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," she replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." And there, in the place where they had built their life together, where they had raised their family and created their legacy, Killian and Sarah Brennan sat wrapped in each other's arms, whole and healed and home. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and the Brennan Ranch prospered under Thomas's management, while Killian and Sarah enjoyed the slower pace of their later years. They had earned their rest, though they remained active in the family's life, offering wisdom when asked and always available to their ever-growing number of descendants. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, the family threw an enormous celebration. Nearly 50 people gathered, including children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, along with friends from Red River and beyond. Sarah wore her best dress, still fitting into it despite the years, and Killian donned the suit he saved for special occasions. During the party, Thomas stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They taught us what real love looks like, not the easy kind that fades when times get hard, but the kind that endures through everything. They showed us that broken things can be made whole, that grief does not have to be the end of the story, and that with patience and dedication, you can build something that lasts." Everyone raised their glasses, and Sarah found herself crying happy tears. She looked around at all these people, this family that had grown from the ashes of her deepest despair, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that night, alone in their room, Killian helped Sarah out of her dress and into her nightgown, his movements still tender after all these years. 30 years, she said. When I think about the woman I was when we married, so scared of being happy, so certain something would go wrong. Nothing went wrong, he said. Everything went right. That is what scares me now, if I am honest. We have been so blessed, Killian. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night afraid it will all disappear. He pulled her into his arms. It is real, Sarah, all of it. Our love, our family, our life together. Nothing can take that away, not even death when it comes. We built something bigger than either of us. She pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Promise me something, anything. When one of us goes, the other has to keep living. Really living, not just going through the motions. We both know what that looks like, and I could not bear to think of you just existing after I am gone. Sarah, promise me, Killian. If I go first, you keep engaging with the family, you keep finding joy. And if you go first, I will do the same. We owe that to each other, to honor what we built by continuing to live fully even when we are alone again. He held her tighter. I promise. Though God willing, we have many more years yet. As it turned out, they had several more good years. They watched their grandchildren marry and have children of their own. They saw the ranch continue to thrive and grow. They experienced the joy of watching the family they had created spread out and flourish. In 1914, when Killian was 76, he began to slow down noticeably. His heart was weakening, the doctor told Sarah privately, and there was nothing to be done except make him comfortable and let him enjoy whatever time remained. Sarah did not tell Killian what the doctor had said. There was no point in burdening him with worry. Instead, she made sure every day counted, that they said the things that mattered, that nothing was left unspoken. On a warm evening in late September, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Killian had been unusually quiet all day, and Sarah could sense him gathering his thoughts. I need you to know something, he finally said. These years with you have been the best of my life. Building this ranch, raising our children, growing old with you, all of it. If I had known how it would turn out, I would not change a single thing. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Killian, let me finish. I know my time is getting short. I can feel it. And I am not afraid because I have lived a full life, a good life because of you. You took a lonely man and gave him a family. You took an empty house and made it a home. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Brennan. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me, she said, her voice breaking. You saved my life, Killian, literally saved it. I would not have survived without you. We saved each other. That is what we have always done. They sat in silence as the sun set, holding hands, both knowing these moments were precious beyond measure. When the first stars appeared, Killian pointed to the brightest one. That is going to be me watching over you, he said. Do not talk like that. Sarah, we have to talk about it. When I am gone, I need you to remember your promise. Keep living. Stay engaged with the family. Let them love you and take care of you. Do not close yourself off the way you did before. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered, "but I am going to miss you so much I do not know how I will bear it. The same way you bore it before, one day at a time, one breath at a time, and you will not be alone. You have Thomas and Martha, Rose and James, all the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. Let them help you." "I will. And Sarah, thank you for everything, for loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a reason to be more than I was. You made me better. You made me whole again," she said. And they sat there under the stars, treasuring each moment, each breath, each heartbeat they had left together. Killian passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, Sarah beside him as she had been for 36 years. He simply did not wake up one morning, his heart finally giving out after a life well lived. The grief nearly leveled Sarah, but she remembered her promise. She remembered all the lessons they had learned together about surviving loss and choosing to keep living. The funeral was enormous, the church in Red River packed with family and friends, all there to honor a man who had been respected and loved throughout the community. Thomas delivered the eulogy, speaking of his father's integrity, his dedication to family, his quiet strength. But it was Sarah who had the last word. She stood at the end of the service, her voice wavering but clear. 36 years ago, I married this man when I was so broken I could barely function. He loved me patiently and thoroughly until I remembered how to be whole. He gave me a family, a home, a life worth living. Losing him feels like losing a part of myself. But I am not the woman I was before I met him. I am stronger now because of what he taught me, because of the love we shared. So I am going to do what he made me promise to do. I am going to keep living fully and joyfully, honoring his memory by embracing the life we built together. That is what he would want, and that is what I owe him. The months after Killian's death were difficult. Sarah felt his absence in every corner of the house, in every routine, in every sunset she watched alone. But she kept her promise. She had Sunday dinners with the family. She held her great-great-grandchildren when they cried. She shared stories about Killian, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as well. Thomas and Elizabeth asked her to move in with them, but Sarah refused. "This house holds all my best memories," she said. "I am not ready to leave it yet." So Thomas arranged for one of the ranch hands to check on her daily, and Martha Rose visited several times a week, and Sarah maintained her independence while still accepting help when she needed it. She lived for 3 more years after Killian's death, years filled with both sadness and joy. She saw 2 more great-great-grandchildren born. She attended her granddaughter's wedding. She helped Thomas navigate a difficult drought, her memory of past challenges proving valuable. She wrote down family stories and recipes, wanting to preserve the history for future generations. On a spring evening in 1917, feeling unusually tired, Sarah sat on her porch to watch the sunset. She thought about Killian, as she did every day, but this time the grief felt less sharp, more like a sweet ache. She had lived the life they built together. She had honored his memory by staying engaged with the world, by continuing to love and be loved. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had survived so much, lost so much, but she had also gained more than she ever thought possible. She had been broken and made whole. She had loved and been loved. She had built a legacy that would continue for generations. Thomas found her the next morning, sitting peacefully in her chair, a slight smile on her face, her eyes fixed on the stars as though she was looking for a particular one. The doctor said her heart had simply stopped, that at 70 she had lived a good long life and had passed without pain. The family buried her next to Killian in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. Her headstone read, "Sarah Brennan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She learned to live again and taught us all what love truly means." At the funeral, Martha Rose spoke for all of them. "Our mother came to this town broken by grief, so lost she could barely see a path forward. Our father loved her with patience and dedication until she found her way back to wholeness. Together, they built a family and a legacy that will endure for generations. They showed us that love can heal, that broken things can be made whole, and that with the right person beside you, you can survive anything and build something beautiful from the ruins." The ranch continued under Thomas's management, and later his sons, the Brennan name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and fair dealing throughout Texas. The main house was maintained and expanded, each generation adding their own touches while preserving the core structure that Killian had built and Sarah had transformed into a home. Years later, when Thomas's great-grandson asked about the photograph that hung in the main hallway, showing a stern-looking rancher and a woman with gentle eyes, Thomas's grandson told him the story. "That is your great-great-great-grandparents, Killian and Sarah. She came to him broken, and he loved her until she was whole. Then together they built all of this." He gestured to encompass the ranch, the family, the legacy. "Everything we have, everything we are, it started with them, with their love and their refusal to give up on each other or themselves." And so the story was passed down through generations, a testament to the healing power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the beautiful things that can grow from the darkest moments when two broken souls find each other and choose to build something whole together.